Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from today. Welcome to Socialsuite's ESG webinar series. My name is Eleanor Bailey-Carter, Socialsuite's Senior Content Strategist. Thank you for joining our webinar today on getting started with your ESG journey. While a few people are joining us here today, it would be great to know where everyone's calling in from. Let us know your location in the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. While you're doing that, it would also be great to hear where you are on your ESG journey. So perhaps you're still unsure on how to get started, or maybe you've even published your first ESG report. Let us know in the chat. We'd love to know. So I'll be monitoring the chat throughout this webinar. So make sure to post any questions you have along the way, and we'll get back to them near to the end of this 30-minute session. Before I introduce today's speaker, I'll share a very quick intro of Socialsuite, so who we are and where we're from. So Socialsuite is an American and Australian software company and a global leader in impact technology. We've helped organizations to measure and report the impact they have on the world. And since 2014, we've been helping organizations to disclose impact and create value. With our ESG software platform and coaching solution, we help companies to get started quickly and easily with their ESG journey. We focus on helping small and medium-sized companies with ESG reporting, but this work is with companies across all industries and various exchanges across the world. And I'd now like to welcome today's speaker. So our Chief Impact Officer, Dr. Tim Siegenbeek van Heukelom, is an ESG specialist with broad knowledge of ESG landscape and recording requirements. Tim is passionate about aligning organizations' overall purpose with delivering day-to-day social good while on the path to profit. He has global experience working with small to large cap companies to help them close the gap between corporate prosperity and sustainable development outcomes by identifying shared value opportunities. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Tim as he walks you through getting started with your ESG journey. Thanks, Tim.
Excellent. Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks for that warm welcome. And thanks, everyone, for joining this webinar. So what I'd like to do today is talk to you about how to start your ESG journey and really thinking about small, medium-sized enterprises. But before we do that, looking at the agenda here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges for SMEs, like how is it difficult and what are some of those roadblocks that we see for SMEs to get started on that journey, and then talk about some of the steps there, 5 key steps and some preliminary considerations to get your journey off the ground, and some lessons that we've learned throughout all the customers around the world that we work with. What have they done in that journey? So they're the 3 main topics that I'll talk you through today. Talk about for about 20-25 minutes. So if you have any questions, like Eleanor said, pop them in the chat and we'll get back to them at the end of the webinar. So first off, framing ESG is really important. So looking at some of those challenges for SMEs. But the main thing that I really want to start with today is talk a little bit about risk and opportunity. And that's really important because what we see is that ESG often is still seen as a downside, as a risk, but there's a lot more to it. So when we think about environmental, social governance issues, we have to think about issues that are relevant, that are material to your business. And what we mean then is, what are those issues that can be reasonably expected to have a financial impact on your business? Now, when we hear that impact, we often tend to kind of think about, negative impact. We think about ESG risk, and we think about which things have the potential to dent our future growth or increase our costs, or both potentially. But there's an upside as well. And that's really important today. We've seen that more and more ESG opportunities are out there. So that's the things that we think about. What has the potential to actually drive future growth, to decrease our costs? And there's a lot more. Think about retaining talent and attracting talent. So there's a lot in that space as well. So it's really important to think about both risk and opportunity when we think about ESG. And the other part of it is then it applies to everyone. It applies to every industry because ESG really is industry agnostic. It is non-financial disclosures. So you might be reporting your financial disclosures already. This is a set of information about the environment, about what you do on the social side, working with people, and about how you're governing your business. And all industries can report on ESG, but across industries, they are exposed to different ESG risks and opportunities. So something that might apply more to one particular industry or business might be more material to them to report on than another industry. But at large, ESG really is relevant to everyone. Now, when we think about that as well, and when we take risk and opportunities and bring that together, you can really create value from ESG. And there's 5 common areas that we see that companies are creating value in that ESG space. So I want to briefly touch upon them because they're really important to keep in mind when you're starting and when you're going through that ESG journey, because it helps you focus on what is important to you, what is material in terms of the impact on your business, and where can you create most value. Now, the first one is pretty straightforward, access to capital. We all know, we've all heard in the news that there's a lot of ESG funds, ESG capital out there. But the important part here is that you need to demonstrate to those investors that you actually are on that ESG journey, that you are reporting, disclosing data, and that you're building up ESG credentials. The second one is about risk management and compliance. On the risk side of things, well, we've seen that there are, of course, risks associated with ESG operationally, on the governance level. So you need to be aware of what those risks are. They need to be on the radar in order for you to understand them and mitigate them. But also compliance is something to really touch upon these days, because what we see is, in particular in the geographies that we work with in the US and Australia, that compliance is coming. And to a degree, we see it a little bit in Australia already, but mostly for SMEs, not so much. We've seen recently that there's been a climate bill both in the US and in Australia with targets really focused on what we're doing around climate. And that means that implementation of those climate bills will mean that there will be impacts, both positive and negative. So it's really important to keep in mind what that compliance is doing and be aware of what those potential areas are that you might need to report on. So in the US, the SEC is really putting into place to climate-focused areas of compliance around your greenhouse gas emissions and looking at more wider climate scenario mapping and forecasting, which is something that's more in the realm of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. You might have heard about that. So we're closely watching that space, and it's important to be aware of what's happening there. But your investors are watching that space as well. They want to know, are you actually keeping up with what's required? Compliance, are you managing those ESG risks? But equally, are you actually capitalizing on some of those opportunities in that space? So it's really important to be very transparent about what you're doing, about sharing information. We'll talk about that quite a lot throughout this webinar. The transparency and the visibility on that journey are really important. The fourth area then, profitability and growth. Clearly, that's the opportunities there. So make sure that you keep in mind there that there are opportunities. And that sounds pretty generic, but think about what's happening in the world. With climate change, we see there's a lot happening around the electrification of whole countries. So that means a lot needs to happen there. A lot of work needs to happen there. So a lot of renewable energy we hear people talk about. So there's a lot of opportunities there in terms of new energy sources, in terms of building new wind farms, solar farms. There's a lot happening in that space that provides opportunities. Equally, the transition to electric vehicles, they all need batteries, and those batteries all need all kind of critical minerals and metals. So there's a lot in that space that provides opportunities. So it's important to be aware of what are those opportunities and how can you leverage them right now rather than waiting for them, for other people to grab the opportunities. And finally, reputation and branding is a key area as well to keep in mind. And don't think just about the external side of it. Your employees and people within the business want to be part of that journey as well. So make sure you take them on that journey and really show them what you're doing. Well, we also see there's some ESG misconceptions. Now, there's really quickly here that what I already said, ESG is industry agnostic. It's not just for sustainable businesses. So it's not only for operators of renewable energy, wind farms or solar farms. Anyone should be doing ESG. And in doing ESG, you don't have to sit there and wait for perfection. It's all about starting that journey now. That's what your stakeholders want to see. Tell us where you are today. We hear some people say, well, my investors don't really care about whether I'm doing ESG reporting or not. Well, a lot of investors increasingly care about this. And if you haven't heard from them, it might have been, if you haven't started that journey yet, that you've been screened out without even being told so. So we see that if you start doing ESG, you might end up on a long list of investors to talk to you about what you're doing from an ESG perspective. But if there's nothing out there, you might not even make that list, and you'll never know. You hear some people say, well, it doesn't really align with our core priorities. The main thing then what we say is, well, does your board actually fully understand ESG? Are they literate around ESG? And in that strategy review, have they really thought about what ESG means in terms of not just risk, but also opportunity? And once you start going through that process, we see that naturally you start to see the links to your core priorities. And finally, we hear a lot that ESG is expensive, difficult, and very time consuming. And that's something I want to talk a little bit more about, because that, to a degree, we agree with that. Because that are the key roadblocks that we see that SMEs run into mostly. They say, well, we do feel that urgency, we do want to do something, but it's such a complex area and we don't really have the time to figure this out. It's too expensive, it's too difficult to get a head around. As you might have heard some of these things, you might have experienced them yourself. These are the things that, from a Socialsuite perspective, this is what we're creating solutions for. But also, this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how can you start your ESG journey and get around those roadblocks. And I'll give you some first considerations. So I'll talk you through some of these things to start thinking about when you're starting that journey, and then we'll take you through some of that steps there. The main thing is, and what I just flagged in the previous 2 slides, is that don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect platform, the perfect framework, person, or reason to get started. It's a journey. Start that journey, get on it, and you'll learn a lot about some of the things you should be doing, could be doing. But it's all about taking action right now and not just sitting there and waiting for compliance to come into place. There are risks that needs to be managed today, and there are opportunities that you can grab today. So just get started. And don't overthink ESG then. There's a lot of information and complexity out there, but essentially it just comes down to reporting on a set of metrics that are material to your business. And a good first step to think about it is just to talk to your stakeholders, possibly first internally with your management and board and employees, about what is material to us. What are those issues that have a material impact on our business? But make sure you don't only focus internally. Go out to the external stakeholders as well, including your investors, and ask them. Do a materiality assessment. You might have heard about that. It's just asking around, what do you see as material to our business? So it gives you focus on what are those first ESG metrics that you can report on, and what do your stakeholders want you to actually do. Now, it's really important to think about building internal capacity. We hear a lot, or we're very limited in capacity. No one really knows ESG. Again, you don't need to be an ESG expert to start a journey there. So don't let a lack of time or capacity stop you from starting that journey. But in doing so, think about, maybe I can find some external support. So think about who is on that journey already. Maybe some of your peers or competitors that have done some of that work there. Look at what they've done. Talk to them if you've got some friends in the industry, how they've addressed this. It's really helpful to get some really small tips to get started, but also seek support from consultants, from other people that are in that space that can give you a bit of support to get going. But you can do a lot of this work yourself. Of course, the expense side of it, yes, ESG can be really expensive, but it's all about, in the end, meeting the business where it's at. So if you're a small business, you don't need to get one of the big accounting firms come in with a team of 12 people with a very high bill that you'll get at the end of it. Now, you can do a lot of this work. You can find solutions that are actually matched to where you're at. So it's important to look at that and find something that is a low threshold starting point that is actually affordable to get started with ESG. But equally, think about the investment into ESG, really the time and money you put in there. See that as an investment. See that as in creating the capacity within the business, making sure that you build your team up, that they understand what ESG is. It's an investment in growing your business if you can find and leverage those opportunities. And it's a way to really create value for your stakeholders. So if that means you can access capital now, that's been a good investment to start that journey. If it means you can attract more people that actually are not more talent into your business, that's a really good investment. So think about it that way as well. When we think about the commitment to ESG, it's really important. You need to commit to this journey, but you have to follow it up with implementation. So a genuine commitment to ESG reporting and building those credentials is really crucial. But if there is a visible lack of implementation, progress, improvement, be really mindful and careful of that, because it can trigger perceptions of greenwashing. You've made a big announcement and a year later, nothing's there, nothing tangible has been reported. So make sure that you keep the momentum and that you push out information. And that's the next part, which is really important. ESG reporting is not a one-off exercise. It's not something that is just completed as a quick sprint, as a tick box exercise, and that's the end of it. It is like your financial reporting. It's non-financial disclosures that you're reporting. So yes, you can put a report together really quickly, but in the end, think about ESG as really about demonstrating on an ongoing basis how you responsibly, transparently, and sustainably operate and govern your business. And that's why it's so important to build internal capacity, to embed ESG across the organization. It's really important to make sure that you're on this journey, you keep sharing information, you keep demonstrating visibly to your stakeholders what you're doing. So that being said, these are some things to think about. But again, like I said at the start, all these things, consider it, but don't let them stop you. So going back to that first one, you don't have to be perfect on any of these points. You don't have to have it all figured out to get started. Take some action and you'll figure a lot of these things out along the way, and talk to people around you, get that support to go through the journey and look what other people are doing. Now, a really good starting point, what we find is taking stock of what you already have. And a lot of companies then say, well, we haven't done anything on ESG. Well, you'll be surprised. A lot of ESG metrics ask you to disclose data and information that you may already have. So you might already have done a lot of things in the normal kind of operations of your business, in the way you govern your organization, that are actually key components of ESG reporting. Now, what I mean there is, I've got a few things on here, like think about a corporate purpose statement. You might have thought about that previously. We have some policies already in place. You might have adopted a modern slavery statement. You already done your greenhouse gas or carbon footprint. All that information is effectively part of that ESG metrics and ESG disclosures. That a lot of information that might already sit in your business there. So think about, what do I have? And that's where you start. It's not about trying to do everything overnight and having everything, all the policies in place and all the data reported. Stakeholders want to see what you have and what you don't have. So it's about drawing a line in the sand and say, hey, I'm starting my ESG reporting now. There's a lot of things here in my first baseline report that I don't have, but I'm showing you that I'm aware of it transparently, and that I'm starting to think about how I can fill the gaps there. Stakeholders and investors are really looking for that, to see that you started the journey, and it's fine if you don't have a lot of things. So you see a quick snapshot on the right of our dashboard out of our platform, where you can see there's a lot of yellow in there. That's in draft. There are things that a company is still working on. We don't have that yet, and that is fine. We really see from a lot of organizations we work with, the first reports are reports with a lot of gaps. But as long as you explain the gaps, why they're there, and what your plans are to address those gaps, that's what people want to see. That's what your stakeholders are interested in. Now, once you've done that, think about reviewing and verifying the first ESG report. So you've done that first report, but it kind of bring up a lot of questions there. Like, what does this metric specifically mean or require from me? Or what language do I use? And how much do I disclose? Is it a page or is it a paragraph? And what do I say when I don't have the data? Or I'm in the middle of taking that action. How do I explain that to stakeholders in a very clear and simple way so they can quickly read that? And where do I sit in between the balance of a very detailed report or generic motherhood statements? Now, it really helps to get a little bit of support to answer these questions. So that's where you, once you've put your report together, again, find someone who can just review that for you and help you answer some of these questions. Now, on the Socialsuite side, we have what we call ESG coaches. They're dedicated account managers that are ESG experts. And they really can help you answer these questions and provide guidance throughout creating that first report. And they can then verify your disclosures in the ESG report. So they can read that through and say, well, you're very generic on this particular metric here. You're not actually answering the question. Do you have some more information, or maybe phrase it in a different way? And one of the key things that we've seen is that even on that level of multinationals, companies that we all know, beautiful ESG reports at the outset. And when you actually read the report, it's a lot of beautiful language, but very generic, and it doesn't actually provide a lot of data or information. Now, we want to make sure that that first report there answers the questions best you can and is as transparent about where you are in that process and not hiding things in beautiful language. So think about that. How can you get someone to help you with that first report? Then think about doing this work here. Like I said, it is a journey you're on. It's not a one-off exercise. So think about how you can educate internally your team and build some internal capacity. Now, it's important to have someone as what we call an ESG lead, someone who drives the implementation. But don't forget to bring your team on that journey with you as well. And so think about things like, is our board ESG literate? And what I mean then is, do they know enough about ESG to provide relevant oversight and insight? And do we have ESG actually on the board agenda? Do we talk about it frequently? Are they across what's happening in that space? How can we best allocate actions across our team in terms of ESG reporting and implementation? And what resources and support do we need to get our team with us on this journey? Then how do we report it up and down in the business? How do we engage and inform our employees, our contractors and suppliers? So there's a lot of questions and things here to think about, but really do that together with your team. Take them on the journey, talk frequently about what you're doing there. And then what we also see sometimes, it really helps to have a strong board mandate around this. So consider having someone talk to your board about ESG. And we've done that with a lot of our customers, where we take 15 minutes and talk to boards and say, this is what ESG is, this is why it's important, your company has just started the journey, and these are some of the material issues for your business, and this is the roadmap for the next 6 months or 12 months, to really get the board part of that journey as well. And we really see, once the board is really taking that up, you see it cascade down the business, and that really helps a lot. Now, visibility around ESG is really rewarded. It's really important not to just do your report, but think about, once that report is done, publish it, announce it, and share it. Make sure that your ESG work is really visible and easily accessible. And what we mean then is, don't hide it somewhere in a far-flung place on your website. So we see sometimes that the ESG report is a news item or a blog item, but after a few weeks, no one will actually read it or see it on your website. So you want to make sure that you really announce and promote your report. Do a press release, tell your investors, put it in your mailing list, update your investor deck. So make sure the message is out there. But also amplify that message then. Think about, who's your corporate advisor, your law firm, your investor relations agency, your PR agency, or any of those type of agencies you work with. Because ESG is a hot topic, they're doing likely work on it. They have other companies that they work with as their customers, and they might be looking at doing a report on some of their customers that are in the ESG space, or doing a webinar, or looking at a conference to bring some people in that are really making progress there. They'd love to hear from you about what you're doing, and they will then really help you amplify that message around your ESG work. So make sure that you leverage that attention that is out there around ESG now. Make it easy for people to find your report, promote it, share it, and not just that one report. Think about all those actions you take every month, every quarter. People want to know what you're doing. So make ESG real time and tell people about it, what you're doing. And finally then, maintain your momentum. So the ESG journey is a slow burn. It's not that sprint there. And think about as well, beyond the excitement of your first ESG report, it's really crucial to keep going then. Because in the end, your first report is really a gap analysis. You're telling the world what you have and what you don't have. And from there on, it's about identifying, what are the gaps? What priorities are we setting? What's the roadmap for the next year? But don't be overwhelmed then, and don't try to do everything at once. Find a few actions you can do this month, because like I said, you might have very limited capacity. So think about, in this quarter, I can do 3 things. I'll put a little bit of time each month apart to do one of these things. But then at the end of the quarter, make sure that you actually, again, like I said, tell the world what you've done. just in a few bullet points, what are your ESG highlights? Tell your stakeholders. And your stakeholders, again, can't emphasize this enough, they're not looking for perfection, but they are looking for dedication and real progress. So show them that you are genuinely and continuously reporting on ESG. And one of our customers, FYI Resources, really great example from their website. Under top level menu, sustainability, you get to a page with a lot of good information, and clearly you see all the reports are on there. You can really easily access their information and see that they actually are on a journey and doing the work every quarter. So it's really important to look as well as how are other people getting the information out. Now, a few more lessons from SMEs around the world. So what have we seen some of our customers that just showed a little bit from FYI Resources, but I want to show you a few more things, and one in particular here. This is a little case study that we have, which is a really great case study around that first value driver, access to capital. Now, what we've seen is Latin Resources. They started their ESG journey with us at Socialsuite around August 2021. And they were really dedicated to committed to getting that first report together. But they said, well, we don't have a lot of that information. Let us go back and see where we can find what we've already done and put that report together. But there are areas in which we simply haven't actually done the work yet. So we worked with them and said, well, the main thing here is again, be transparent about where you are. Explain why you haven't done it, what your plans are going forward. So put together that report in a transparent way that your stakeholders understand where you are. So they've done that, and in February this year, they released their first ESG report, which was a big milestone from them. But quite soon after, if you look at the right of this slide there, in April this year, they had a massive cap raise. And in that cap raise, cornerstone of this cap raise was 50 million Australian dollars coming from an ESG fund, an electrification and decarbonization fund. So it really shows it's by being on that journey and doing the work there, that even within the course of a year, you can do a lot of work there and really get that value from ESG reporting. Now, of course, there's a lot more to learn from SMEs, and we don't have a lot of time to really dig into a lot of case studies today, but there are some really key things that I want to share with you as well that we've learned. We've seen that ESG reporting can really improve ESG ratings and scores. We've seen some really good proof points. One of our US customers, Optimize RX, improved their ISS Global ESG score by doing that first ESG report. We've seen that FYI Resource, which I mentioned previously as well, they report with Sustainalytics as well. We've seen their score improve there. So it's really important to think about that as well. And in particular in the US, investors really focus on ESG scores. So they do want to read what you're actually doing from a disclosure point of view, but those scores are important. So by getting onto that journey, you can quite easily start improving your ESG scores. Then the other part is the opportunities there. And we spoke about that previously a little bit, but we've really seen, and a good example is Minbos Resources. Throughout that ESG journey, they realized that it is not just about risk. There are a lot of opportunities here. And they noticed that in the work that they were already doing, they could easily create carbon credits and create this whole new income stream from carbon credits. Elixir Energy, exploration company, and they found that they actually saw all these new opportunities. They were looking at doing fracking, and then they said, well, we can also do all this forestry, and we can look at green hydrogen. So they went into exploring other options. There were really like ESG opportunities for them. And then the world is really interested in your ESG journey. Again, that visibility piece, I can't emphasize that enough as well. Once you start that journey, people love to hear from you. We've seen 3 of our customers, Geo40, Latin Resources, and Binance Australia. They were featured earlier this year in a Sky News Business Week report on why ESG is crucial for investors. So once you get your information together, and once you start pushing out that, people will come to you. They will ask you, tell me more about what you're doing, how you're doing it. So these are some of the things we've seen across the world that are really important. Now, I'll leave it there. We're close to time. I'll leave it there for today. And I want to hand it back to Eleanor, who will wrap up the webinar for us today. She'll talk a little bit more about how you can get started if you're interested in Socialsuite, and then see if there are any questions that I can answer.
Thank you so much, Tim, for that. So we're just at time, so I'll give you a quick run through our ESG subscription here. The main piece that you can see right at the bottom is that for everyone attending this webinar up until the end of the week, we're actually halving our onboarding fees. So that's a deal that you don't want to miss out on. We'll be emailing you this along with a video after this session. So don't worry, you can find that within your inbox. But here is absolutely everything you get with an ESG subscription. So you can kick off your ESG reporting in 60 minutes. We have our technology alongside our ESG coaching. So that's personalized account management from experts such as Tim to work alongside you to help you on your journey. You can access 24-hour resources and create quarterly ESG disclosure reports. And the framework that we're using is the 21 core stakeholder capitalism metrics framework. We're just over time here, but I would like to open the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask to Tim here today? I've just had one that's come through privately here. I've got a message for you here, Tim. We're a team with limited capacity. Does your service help with that specifically?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. And what we see is that we're working with a lot of what we call micro caps, small organizations with a handful of people. We've got a few organizations, 2 or 3 people that say, we feel the urgency. We need to get started here, but how do we do that? And we've really kind of created our solution around a platform that enables you to do a little bit of work there. We can really help you with that onboarding, those first few weeks there, to get that first report in a really good shape there. And then after that, we're there to help you identify a few actions. Our ESG coaches really make sure that you don't lose momentum. We follow up with you, we help you identify a few actions. And of course, there's a little bit of time that needs to be dedicated to this, but we're there to help you on the platform make ESG easy, but also to, you always have a friendly face there, someone who's there to help you do the work effectively. So yes, it's very well tailored and suited towards the smaller end of companies.
Thank you so much. And last question here, Tim, before we wrap up, can you talk to us a little bit more about the framework that we're using, specifically the 21 core stakeholder capitalism metrics here?
Definitely. So yes, you might have seen there's a lot of complexity around ESG, there's a lot of frameworks and standards around globally. The world is moving toward the consolidation of ESG into one framework so that everyone's doing the same thing. We don't have to decide which framework is best for us. And the first step in that journey has been the creation of what we call the stakeholder capitalism metrics that was done by the World Economic Forum. It was launched in 2020 and was created based on the top 5 or 6 voluntary ESG reporting frameworks out there. So you might have heard of SASB and GRI and TCFD. All those frameworks have been integrated into this particular framework. You're not reporting on everything that's in there, but it's a broad-based, industry-agnostic core set of ESG metrics across 4 pillars, 21 metrics that are a perfect starting point for any type of business, small or large, doesn't matter what industry you're in. So it's a great starting point, and that's why we're using that framework.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If you have any follow-up questions, please do email Sam Wilson, our ESG sales rep, but we'll be reaching out to you via email with a link to this video so you can continue to reference it along with the onboarding pricing there for you. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you so much to Tim for today's session.